History plays important role in our life. Actually, through history only we come to know how we lived and how we should live. So it's an important factor of our life, and somebody who can understand the history, and not only understand, who can depict the history and who can narrate the history in the proper manner, becomes immensely important in our life. There are very few people of that kind who put their mind, body and soul to study the history, the ancient part of our life. One man who stood apart was Dr. B. Lal. He not only studied the archaeology, but also told the entire world how the Indians were, what was our perception, what was our tradition, what was our heritage, and how it taught lessons to the entire world. Started his career as an archaeologist in 1946. Today, he completes 71 years in archaeology. That's a remarkable achievement. And when we look back at his work, his achievements, and his dedication, we all get inspired. He is an institution in himself who teaches us how to live archaeology in today's time. So it's not past, it's really present, and to some extent, its future as well.
While Professor Brajvasi Lal's relentless quest to unearth and understand ancient Indian history continues to this very day, he vividly recalls how he found a career path through an unlikely subject, Sanskrit.
I fared very well in my high school and intermediate and got UP government scholarship. So when I went to the University of Allahabad, I had with me the support of 20 rupees scholarship. At that time, the total expenditure needed was 50 rupees. So I gave 2 tuitions to students, one in the morning, one in the evening. Now, I also participated in extracurricular activities. I was a member of the hockey team, I was a member of the volleyball team, and besides I used to take part in dramas. So all this meant a lot of pressure. And by the middle of the second year BA, I collapsed. I had fever for 3 months before the examination. And it happened as was anticipated. In mathematics, I did very badly, just scraped through. In English, I got good marks. In Sanskrit, I topped the list of the candidates. Now, that became a total changing point in my life. And at that time, I was very sorry for it, but I didn't want to go in for Sanskrit. But because I topped the list of Sanskrit candidates, I was given a fellowship. And that fellowship sustained me. So that was a temptation to take up Sanskrit. Now, today looking back, I found, as they say, failure is the player of success. This failure in mathematics kept me away from mathematics and took me to Sanskrit. Now, in Sanskrit, there was a branch called epigraphy, in which ancient inscriptions in Sanskrit and Pali were taught, and also architecture. So I opted for that. And then that became a point of diversion towards archaeology.
The earnestness and diligence of young Brajvasi won over his teachers and made him an instant favorite. When a student backed out at the last minute from a university drama production, Professor Lal decided to help his teacher by playing the character of Shakuntala.
Playing Shakuntala? The drama was to be staged only for one night. It was so much liked by the audience, packed house, that we had to do it for 3 days instead of one.
In fact, it was his university itself that recommended his name for training in the Archaeological Survey.
At this point, I am reminded of something how I got the affection of my teachers. One of my Sanskrit teacher, Pandit Chattopadhyay, when he learned that I was to go for training to Texila, a very cold place compared to Allahabad, he asked, Brijvasi, do you have an overcoat? I said, sir, I have never heard of an overcoat. He was so kind as to got one prepared from me and gave it to me. See the kind of teachers.
A renowned British archaeologist of the time, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, was newly appointed the Director General of the Archaeological Survey.
When I went to Texila for training and reported that I had come, Wheeler gave me an interview, and the first thing he said, I find from your curriculum vitae that you have done MA in Sanskrit. Have you come here to teach us Vedas? I said, sir, I won't teach anybody unless he wants it. But the point is that mine is a blank slate. You can write anything on it. I can assure you whatever is written on it will be written.
Wheeler had brought in a new kind of methodology for excavation based on stratigraphy. The first few weeks saw tensions brew, where the young trainee pointed out his formidable boss's mistakes a couple of times, only to vanish with,
Next morning he rushed to my trench and he said, my dear, why you were right.
Despite the run-ins, Wheeler played an instrumental role in his entry into the survey. Even in a tough environment, young Brajvasi's earnestness continued to win hearts.
No, I must say, I had a sort of love and hate relationship for Sir Mortimer. Anybody in that situation would have been against me, I'm sure. Would have hated me or probably thrown me out of the training camp. But he began to love me. And 27 years later, after this training camp, when I was invited to deliver a lecture at the School of Oriental and African Studies in London, the organizers requested Sir Mortimer to chair the lecture. Now, while introducing me to the audience in London School of he referred to these two events. He said, here is my student. Look at greatness of the man who, contested what I said. That requires courage. And Wheeler had it.
Taking on his new responsibility as an officer in the Archaeological Survey, Brajvasi's keen logical approach found an unconventional ally in ancient Indian texts. Hence began the wedlock between archaeology and literature that solved many deadlocks.
The changeover to Sanskrit became useful in two ways. It paved the way for going into the archaeological. Secondly, the knowledge of Sanskrit has been of great help to me in interpreting India's past with reference to archaeology. So in all my books, I have made an attempt to keep literature on one side and archaeological evidence on the other and see how far they tell you, which is something which nobody else has done.
He tested this wedlock in Shishupalgarh in 1948, where excavations revealed a fort that mirrored the layout of an ideal fort mentioned in Arthashastra of Kautilya from 4th century BCE. And thus young Brajvasi embarked on a quest to unravel the truth about India's past.
Professor Brajvasi Lal, or better known as BB Lal, has been a renowned scholar of world repute, and he is the greatest archaeologist living today in the country. In his early part of career, he excavated some of the very important sites such as Hastinapur, Kalibangan, also Gilund, and not only in India but also abroad. In Egypt, he excavated Nubia.
Professor B. Lal set out to find if the ancient Indian epics were a myth, as was widely believed, or did they have any basis in history. The historicity of Mahabharata presented a great problem as the text itself had seen a huge inflation as time went by.
So around 1950, I took up this work and explored all the sites associated with the story. And to my good luck and surprise, I found that they carried a particular kind of cultural complex in the lowest levels. We call this the painted graver culture, the most distinctive pottery of the period.
It came to be known through carbon-14 methods of dating that this pottery had a lifespan from 1200 BCE to 700 BCE.
So the next thing we did to excavate Hastinapur, the principal site in the story, we laid a major trench right across the mound from the western to the eastern side. Now, while we were excavating, we observed a very strange thing. On the western side and the middle area, the painted graver was there, but on the river side it was absent. I was very much worried about it.
Having spent the evening running the puzzle through his mind, Professor Lal woke up his colleagues at 1 a.m. to help dig a new trench under the light of Petromax lamps.
It was an exciting thing. But you see, since the idea came to my mind, I was restless. I said, whatever night or day, let us go ahead and find out. And in about a week's time, we found exactly the place from where the mount eastern side was cut.
Driven as if by instinct, Professor Lal found the erosion scar left by the flood which had cut the mound, but that didn't satisfy him. His astute reason led him to bore holes in the riverbed where undoubtedly he found painted graveware at a depth of 15 meters. He then looked up Matsya Puran and Vayu Puran, which gave genealogy from the time of Parikshit, who ascended the throne after Mahabharata.
The text says, 15th generation from from Parikshit was a king called Nichakshu. And the text says, Gangaya aparite tasmin nagare nagas avay tyaktva Nichakshu nagaram Kaushambyam sanivasati.
Translated into English, the text says that during the time of Nichakshu, a great flood will wash away Hastinapur, and the capital will be shifted to Kaushambi.
So we did some work at Kaushambi, and in the lowest levels of the site, we found a variety of painted graver, which was coming up at the Hastinapur site, which was there at the time of the flood. So it very clearly established that where Hastinapur ended, Kaushambi began. And this was a very satisfying thing, that the literary evidence was supported by archaeology, archaeological evidence was supported by literature. So mutually they confirmed that there was a flood and Hastinapur was abandoned and the capital was shifted to Kaushambi, which means there was a historical reality.
With so much already established on his quest for answers, Professor Lal now looked at genealogical accounts. It was found that a ruler named Udayan was 24th from Parikshit. According to documented history, Udayan was a contemporary of Lord Buddha and thus ruled around 500 BCE. Then Professor Lal computed the average ruling period of all the kings in Indian history, starting from the Mauryas right up to Bahadur Shah Zafar.
We found that the total period of this rule and the number of rulers involved, the average was 13.55. Now, let us say it was 14 or even 15. Maybe it could have been more, but that is what the calculation was. Now, if you multiply 15 per ruler with 24 rulers, it comes to 360. If you add this figure of 360 to the time when Udayan was ruling, there is 500, it comes to 860. So, roughly the time of the Mahabharata comes to 860.
While reaching unprecedented heights in his career, Professor Lal's biggest strength has always been his family and the unwavering support of his loving wife, Mrs. Kusum Lal.
It was the year 1961, I think. Government of India sent a team under my leadership to Nubia. We reached Cairo in the evening. My wife was with me. She has always been at all the excavations wherever I was. She assisted me quite a lot. When we were there in Cairo, she developed some fever the first night itself. Next morning we are scheduled to go to see the pyramids. I told him not to come because it is a very hard thing going up the pyramids and all that. She wouldn't give up. She said no, she would come. So in spite of high fever, she was there with me. Went up and down the pyramid. So this is what she was.
In 20 years, Professor Lal rose to the chair of Director General of the Archaeological Survey. And 5 years into handling this responsibility, Professor Lal realized that carrying on research alongside the arduous duties of the DG could not possibly go on. He decided to take voluntary retirement to continue in academics. His decision was vetoed by the ministry and then Prime Minister Indira Gandhi herself. It was only after pursuing the matter for 2 long years that he was finally granted his wish.
These are all stories. My entry into the Archaeological Survey, my exit from the Archaeological Survey, all these are stories in themselves.
After establishing the Mahabharata as a historical reality, Professor Lal turned his attention towards the Ramayana. He worked extensively on 5 sites associated with the story as he embarked on a 10-year project on archaeology of the Ramayana sites.
Under Ramayan project, along with Mr. K.N. Dikshit, he excavated a number of sites associated with the history of Ramayana. He excavated Ayodhya, Parihar and Sringverpur.
And in the case of the Mahabharata, we had a common lowest denominator in terms of the painted grivar. In this case, we had another kind of pottery called the northern black polished ware. It is a black pottery, highly shining with different colors, indigo, blue, gold and silver, different colors, and very fine ware. That binds all the sites. And the date of this pottery is also at the beginning of the first millennium BC, and it continues to about 300 BC, a span of about 700 years.
Thus, the cultural connection between the sites was proven, yet the question of historicity of the Ramayana remained. The answer came in the form of an absent ancient mound at Bharadwaj Ashram. While other sites had 10-meter or so high mounds, this was a flat piece of land. The initial excavations revealed structures from the Gupta period.
When we went further down, we found no structures. It was sand and nothing else. But within the sandy deposit, we found strip pieces of the northern black polished. All the varieties, gold and silver and all that, very rich. That is the beginning of the northern black polish, that is the correct style. All that we found a few post holes and pieces of clay bearing reed marks, which indicated that in that sandy area there were huts, wattled and daub huts. Now this scenario very well fits into that of an ashram. There is enough circumstantial evidence to establish the historicity of the Ramayana. Then there are collateral pieces of evidence.
A 2nd century BCE terracotta figure depicting Ravan and Sita was excavated from Kaushambi, and a 3rd century AD terracotta figurine from Nacharakhera in Haryana shows Ram in Abhay Mudra with an inscription which says Ram in correct Brahmi characters of the 3rd century AD. Further literary evidence came from a 4th century BCE Arthashastra which cited examples of Ravan and Sita.
So, even secular texts of the 4th century BC introduce you to these two figures, Ravan and Duryodhana, which means both Mahabharata and Ramayana had a historical basis. Oral tradition plays a very important part in Indian history. So we should not completely say that all oral traditions are myths. We have to take a judicious view of the whole thing, not just dump these traditions in the nearest dustbin.
In the last 20 years, what he has written on different aspects, it's all problem-oriented approach in archaeology, which is very rare at present amongst the scholars. And accordingly, he has his theories about different aspects on which he has written during these 20 years and published 10 books, and he is still working on it. So that all is based on certain new theories which have justification, and no one can challenge him in on these aspects. Like the theory everyone for the last 200 years is saying about the Aryan invasion, and very categorically, in very simple language, he has denied it. And so far, nobody has the courage to go against that theory. And it is being established now. So he is a great person.
Completely immersed in his work, Professor Lal once composed a poem based on one of his dreams.
The poem is whisked away by a damsel. And the damsel is the bronze figure of found at Mohenjo-daro. Then there was light and the damsel appeared and she whisked me away to unknown land. That unknown land was Mohenjo-daro.
For centuries now, there has been a raging debate on the origins of the Aryans. It started in the 19th century when Max Müller, a German scholar, dated the Vedas to 1200 BCE, while accepting that the sutra literature existed in 6th century BCE.
The methodology of Maximer was that each of the previous stages, namely Aranyaka, Brahmanas and Vedas, should be given 200 years. So 600 plus 2 plus 2 plus 2, here I got the figure of 1200. Now when his contemporaries like Whitney, Goldstaker and others asked him, how do you say 200 years, why not 100 or why not 500? Then he had no answer. Ultimately he shrank back and he said, whether the Vedas were written in 1000 BC or 2000 BC or 3000 BC, nobody on earth will be able to determine. But the whole pity is that in spite of such a candid confession by Max Muller himself, his blind followers even today stick to 1200 BC and they do not want to cross this Lakshmana Rekha.
In about 1920, the Harappan civilization, now also called the Indus-Saraswati civilization, was discovered at Harappa and Mohenjo-daro. Further investigations revealed that this civilization is assignable to 3rd millennium BCE.
Then in 1946, my guru, Sir Mortimer Wheeler, excavated at Harappa and he found a fort at the site. Somebody told him that in the Vedic literature, Indra is mentioned as Purandar, that is destroyer of the forts. He jumped at the idea and readily grasped it and said, here is the fort, here is Indra who destroyed the forts. So Indra, symbolic of Vedic Aryans, must have destroyed the Harappan civilization. It was a very good, thrilling conclusion. For a while it held field, but then later on it had to be given up. Why? In the first place, at Harappa there is a fort, but there is no evidence whatsoever of its destruction. So how can you call that somebody destroyed the Harappan fort?
When the invasion theory lost steam, some scholars suggested that the Aryans came from the Bactria-Magiana archaeological complex, a culture of the 2nd millennium BCE in Central Asia.
In the first place, they said the Aryans are nomads, and these are the Central Indian nomads came here. I'm afraid they didn't do their homework. The BMAC people are not at all nomads. They have very good architecture, temple complexes, palace complexes, a whole city complex, and not only that, their antiquities include silver axe, which was meant to be held by some ruler in a staff, and very good human and animal figures. There were lions whose body was studded with gems. Now such a great material cannot be the product of nomads. But they wanted to say nomads because they had already committed to saying that the Vedic people were nomads. So we must bring in the nomads. The more important point is that not even a single artifact of the BMAC people crossed the river Indus. Nothing crossed the Indus. Now, and east of the Indus was the mainland of the Aryans. So how can you say that the BMAC influenced the Aryans at all? So this thesis also failed. As I said, you should not take any side. Keep your mind open and then you will arrive at the truth. If you are biased in favor of X or Y or Z, then you are bound to mess up.
Over time, DNA evidence has clearly established that Indian and Central Asian populations share a common ancestry. Professor Lal reasoned that the exodus was from India.
Now, this DNA statement is supported by two very important independent pieces of evidence. One is from literature, another is from archaeology. The literary evidence is like this. There is a text called Bodhayan Shrot Sutra. It's a later Vedic text of about 6th, 7th century BC. In it there is a mention that Pururavas and Urvasi had two sons, Ayu and Amabasu. Then it goes on to say, Ayu went eastwards and established the kingdoms of Kuru Panchal and Kashi Videyas. The other son, Amabasu, went westwards and responsible for the population in the Gandhar region, Persian region, right up to Arat. And this movement of Amabasu westwards is authenticated by archaeology as well.
Indra and other Vedic gods found mention in a 14th century BCE inscription on a clay tablet found in Turkey, while another inscription clearly mentions Sanskrit words.
So the presence of the Vedic gods, the presence of the Sanskrit language forces you to say that the Aryans were present in Turkey in the 2nd millennium BC.
Professor Lal resolved to settle this debate with logical arguments based on facts. He found that the ancient river Saraswati is accorded great importance in the Rig Veda. Excavations by an Indo-Italian team at a site called Kalibangan revealed that it was abandoned in 2000 BCE due to drying up of the river Saraswati. Professor Lal reasoned that these findings pointed to the singular fact that the Rig Veda must be prior to the drying up of the river Saraswati.
So the minimum date you have to give to the Rig Veda is 3rd millennium BC. And Rig Veda was not, it is a compilation, it is Samhita. So earlier verses were also incorporated. So it's quite likely that the earlier stages go back even earlier than 3rd millennium BC.
Delving further, Professor Lal found two verses in the 10th mandala of the Rig Veda that illuminate the geographical landmarks of the time.
I don't know whether the composer of those verses was a geographer by profession or what. But he mentions all the rivers, Imam, Me, Gange, Yamune, Saraswati, Shaswadri, and goes on up to the Sindhu. And also mentions the western tributaries like Kabul, Kubha and all that. Which means this was the area occupied by the Rigvedic people in the 3rd millennium BC.
Excavations upstream from Kalibangan at sites such as Kunal and Bhairana revealed carbon-14 dates, which take the formative stages of the Harappan civilization to the 5th and 6th millennium BCE.
It means that the Harappan civilization or the Harappans were sons of the soil. Now, if they are the sons of the soil, then what would happen for the Rigveda? They are the two facets of the same thing. That means the Rigvedic people were also sons of the soil, if you want to use it. They were neither invaders nor immigrants, but were indigenous.
Various theories have cropped up over time, which have been systematically denied by Professor Lal.
So, of course, the debate must go on because with archaeologists or DNA people thrive on throwing some new ideas so that people can get shocked or amused.
In 1957, he found his guru in Dr. R.D. Ranade. Professor Lal terms this meeting as his rebirth.
You see, that was a very turning point. I somehow came in touch with my guru and the whole life changed.
Professor Lal's quest led him on to great discoveries which revealed a big chunk of India's past to him. At Sringaverapura, he dug up a tank which proved to be a 2000-year-old unique example of Indian hydraulic engineering. At Indraprastha in Purana Kila, he found painted graveware which connected it to other Mahabharata sites as well as pushing back Delhi's cultural history way past the medieval landmarks of the city today. At Kalibangan, Professor Lal found answers which greatly contributed to our knowledge and understanding of the Harappan civilization. He established that the direction of writing for the Harappan script is right to left and revealed an ancient pattern of agricultural cultivation which is followed even today.
You come across certain very interesting things which you begin to enjoy. You get fruit of your labor.
Having busted numerous myths and revealing the fine print of India's heritage to the world, Professor Lal garnered unequivocal praise and accolades from all over the globe. From being awarded the Padma Bhushan to being hailed as a doyen of archaeology, Professor Lal continues to be an inspiration to many.
You see, I have always felt that I am not the doer, but I am being guided by some agency. In fact, if you have a look at my book, Piecing Together Memoirs of an Archaeologist, which is a sort of autobiography, in the epilogue I have mentioned, and I quote two last lines of that. Through the grace of Sadguru, I have come to realize that I am only a typist. The dictation giver is someone else. S capital, E capital.